Test 1 2, test 1 2. Can we bring it up in the room, Derek? Test 1 4, test 1 4.
Everyone, and welcome to the JPS Board of Managers meeting. I will go ahead and call our meeting to order, and we will begin by Leanne coming up with the prayer. Okay.
It's so great to be together today. It's been wonderful. Can you hear me now? It's been wonderful to be out on the floor and in the halls and see all the t-shirts, everybody wearing their JPS pride. So, with that spirit of gratitude and pride, will you please join me in prayer? Loving God, we thank you so much for every single person in this room and for those who are attending virtually. We know it takes every single team member, leader, board member, and community member to help transform healthcare. And so we ask today for wisdom, unity, guidance, and especially in today's world, we ask for harmony and peace. We pray that JPS can be an environment of healing and hope for everyone, especially for the patients entrusted to our care. And so we ask, bless our patients, our team members, our leaders, our board members, and our community, so that together we can create the most peaceful, joyful, hopeful future possible. In your holy name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Okay. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item on our agenda is the swearing in of our new board member. Would you please come up? You want this side? Okay, we can stand up here.
I, Leonard Firestone,
Do solemnly swear and affirm
do solemnly swear and affirm
that I will faithfully execute the duties of the position to which I have been appointed
that I will faithfully execute the duties of which I've been appointed
by the Tarrant County Commissioners Court,
by the Tarrant County Commissioners Court,
and I will, to the best of my ability,
and I will, to the best of my ability,
carry out such duties
carry out such duties
in a manner consistent with the Tarrant County Hospital District bylaws
in a manner consistent with the Tarrant County District bylaws
and the laws of the state and the United States.
and the laws of the state and the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Welcome.
Thank you very
Okay.
much.
Good job.
Okay.
Beautiful. Thank you.
Okay. Do we have any citizens wishing to address the board? Okay. Then the next on our agenda is the approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections to the minutes? If there being no corrections to the minutes, I will entertain a motion for approval. Okay, Amanda? Okay, all right. Blake, did you have something?
No.
Okay, all those in favor of approval of the minutes signify by saying aye. Those opposed by nay, okay? Okay, thank you for that. I want to say to all of the staff members, executive staff, and to all of the medical staff, I want to thank you for your dedication to this hospital and for the work that you do. You come every day and do a wonderful job. I know this is hospital week, but I think I want to say it a little bit more than hospital week. Thank you, thank you, thank you for what you do, okay? All right. Next, I have I think I need to make you aware that Roger will not be here. He's going to a ceremony with his his son is getting an award at 2, and Ralph Emerson is not going to be here today.
Okay.
All right, your report.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and welcome, Mr. Firestone, to this amazing board. So I'm clicking through this? Okay. I may need Shannon up here to, okay, just a few updates because we do have an amazing and robust agenda today. Just some construction updates. We have 3 of the master facility plan projects that are now underway, which include our medical home Southwest, our psychiatric emergency center, and our temporary parking. And so it doesn't look like much is going on here, but we actually were able to get a lot of the permitting done, which takes quite some time. And it's now, you see some of the grading that's going on out at the medical home Southwest current site here. And there's putting in some retention drainage in the back there. So this is a lot of work. And so they continue to bring those piles of dirt there to begin the construction that will start soon. These are just some more kind of aerial shots. You can see things are coming. Our psychiatric emergency center, for those who drive in on Hemp Hill there, you can see the work that is being done with our psychiatric emergency center. Again, just to remind you, this will be completed in summer of 2025, and the connection to TSP is being completed, and foundation is starting to be laid to start the large psychiatric emergency center. So I wanted to let you know that all of that is going on. Again, here's closer. And this is not as exciting, but we do have temporary parking, and it did take some time. But I'm impressed. We do have this flat lot there. So this was that old green space beside the pavilion. So you can see they're working on this. Okay. I would now like to introduce Dr. Carla Putty, who is our new Chief Medical Officer. Yeah. Dr. Carla Putty, if you can come up and tell us a little bit about yourself. Yeah, you have to sit right there in that chair and get used to it.
Seat.
As you can tell, this is my first meeting. So, thank you, Dr. Duncan. Good afternoon, members of the board and everybody. My name is Sudhakar Karulapudi, 2 difficult names. Please call me Dr. K. I'm an internal medicine, board-certified internal medicine physician. Did all of my work in academic and non-academic centers, and for the past 15 years, I have served in a variety of clinical roles and leadership roles, helping institutions, medical staff, and all our colleagues try to deliver on the promise of clinical excellence. Most recently, I served as the regional chief medical officer for 4 hospitals. One was in Alaska, 3 in the state of Washington, and had the same responsibilities: quality, safety, and clinical excellence. This is my 4th week in JPS, 6 in the state of Texas. So, and I moved from the Pacific Northwest, so it's exciting. I'm excited. Every day I learn something new, and every day I've seen just the true compassion of care for people that we have at JPS. So I'm really grateful for the opportunity to be here, to serve along with this team, just be part of the JPS community. So that's me.
Thank you. And we actually recruited him during a beautiful time in Fort Worth, and where it was really cold up in Seattle and close to Alaska border. And we were able to close the deal with Dr. Carla Putty. So thank you for joining the team, Dr. Carla Putty. And then Dorthy stole a little bit of my thunder, but I do want to speak on behalf of the board and on the executive team to all the employees of JPS. This is always a special time of year for me because we are recognizing everyone who touches JPS. It's not just a segment of the employees, but it is everyone. And although it took a pandemic for the world to see and to call those who work in hospitals heroes, What I have to say about JPS is that we've always recognized every employee as a hero and will continue to remain to see them as heroes. And so it's been great. You saw Leanne in her T-shirt. As everyone knows, I'm not a real T-shirt person for staff, but that seems to be the number one request from our staff. And so they've been involved in a lot of activities this week in which we celebrate each other. We celebrate the patients that allow us to serve them. We celebrate the communities and the partnerships, and you'll hear a little bit about that today with the Las Vegas trail work that is going on. But like Dorothy, I'd like to thank all of the employees and all of you board members and my amazing executive team for just all that you do. So thank you, and happy Hospital Week. With that, I'm going to ask Ashley, is she here? Everyone knows Ashley Quinones, and everyone knows there's quite a bit going on in Austin. There's also quite a bit going on at the federal level, too. And she's just going to update the board on some of the bills that are working their way through and how it may impact us. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Duncan, and thank you, Board, for a few minutes of your time this afternoon. We are well into session. We only have 18 days left in the state legislative session, so certainly things are in full force at this point. As a reminder, we've been focused on several key areas this session on behalf of JPS, those being items to support workforce initiatives to increase the workforce, whether it be from a nursing perspective or an allied health perspective. We've been focused on behavioral health bills that would bring additional resources to communities to support those that have behavioral health needs and behavioral health challenges. We've also been focused on promoting different bills that are geared to decrease workplace violence in a healthcare setting, and certainly focused on legislation that would support our means to continue to derive supplemental payments and support, the great work that we do. So there are probably 150 bills or so to 200 bills so this session that I've been monitoring and, working on in different degrees. We won't go through 200 bills here today, but I do have two that I wanted to highlight specific to workplace violence prevention, and some great news to report. There's a Senate Bill 240 by Dr. Donna Campbell out of the New Braunfels area that she authored that would require, it actually would amend the Health and Safety Code to require healthcare facilities to adopt, implement, and enforce a written workplace violence prevention policy and written workplace violence prevention plan to protect healthcare workers. And this bill has moved completely through the process at this point. It's been passed by both the Senate and the House, and it's actually now on Governor Abbott's desk for him to hopefully sign. So this has been a significant piece of legislation. It's been very well received. It's moved very fast through the process, and it's probably one of the first bills that's come across the governor's desk at this point. So the good news in terms of the bill, JPS, in my opinion, we've been ahead of the curve on a lot of this. We've had a violence prevention steering committee and staff committee set up for some time that's been working on and has implemented some wonderful policies to prevent workplace violence in our own organization, and encouraged employees to speak up when they've encountered such a situation. And that's another piece of this bill, is it prevents retaliation, if you will, towards an employee that does speak up about an incident that's occurred in a healthcare setting. So very glad to see that this bill hopefully will be signed by the governor. And then one last one, again, under the umbrella of preventing workplace violence, Senate Bill 840 by Senator Royce West, who has a significant part of Dallas County and a portion of Tarrant County. He's been the bill author and certainly a champion for Senate Bill 840. 840, and it actually relates to increasing the criminal penalty on an individual that does assault or is violent, towards a healthcare worker. It puts it on the same plane as assault to a law enforcement officer. I believe it's a third-degree felony that starts out at. So we already have some provisions in the law that relate specifically to emergency departments in that space, but this bill expands it to be, an assault on any healthcare worker in any healthcare setting. So today, that bill it was passed in the House with an amendment. It's going back to the Senate for them to hopefully approve now the amended bill, and if that all goes well, then that means it'll pass on the Senate as well. So just a couple of examples of, bills that we're working on, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have, and if there's more information you may want offline, I'm happy to chat as well.
Ashley, may I ask a question? Let me throw out two questions, and you can address them both. I see how Senate Bill 840 will be beneficial. Senate Bill 245 by Dr. Campbell, since that seems to be adding requirements to hospitals, and we're already apparently meeting those, explain how that would actually help JPS. And then I understand there's a bill that's pending. I don't know how far along it is or if it's on calendars, but it would limit reimbursements to hospitals for all of the state health plans, like teachers and state employees.
Yes,
can you
that's
talk about
Dr.
that bill and
Bonnet's.
how that might impact JPS financially?
I can. So let me scroll over to that so I get my numbers correct. Are you speaking of House Bill 5186? That's by Representative Greg Bonin, Dr. Greg Bonin.
I think
yeah.
Dr. Bonin is behind that bill too, yes.
Yeah, that's his bill. There's several components of this bill, and this bill was introduced very late in session, but it essentially would require a hospital to care for certain segments of state employee populations. Whether or not you may take that state employee plan, you would be required to, care for, I believe, let me see here, it's going to be the employees within the retirement system of Texas, the teacher retirement system, University of Texas system, and the Texas A&M University system health plans. So it essentially would force you, even if you don't have an agreement with that particular health plan that those employees fall under, it would force you to, we do accept all patients, but it would force you to provide that care, and then ultimately, have to abide by whatever those plans are. The other part of that is it sets maximum rates or rate caps for hospital services, ambulatory surgical center services, and also in freestanding emergency centers. So instead of us being able to negotiate directly with the payer, with the managed care company, with that contract of what that reimbursement structure might look like. The bill would also allow the legislature, the state government, to set maximum rates that a hospital could be reimbursed for certain services while caring for those subsets of those populations, of those state employee populations that I listed. So instead of us being JPS, just negotiating directly with a managed care organization on those contracts, this bill would allow the state government to come in and set a maximum reimbursement rate that you could get for providing certain services. So it would be, essentially kind of voiding out, if you will, whatever negotiated rate you may already have with the payer. So I didn't look up to see where this bill is today. The last I knew, it was left pending in committee. I believe the House Insurance Committee, if I'm not mistaken. I've been keeping an eye on, or we've been keeping an eye on it just because of the bill author. I mean, Dr. Bonin is the chair of appropriations in the Texas House. He's very well regarded. He's a neurosurgeon, so anything that deals with health care, that deals with, insurance, he's looked to as an expert in the legislature on that. So it is definitely a bill, that we have concerns about and we're following. Yeah. Going back to your other question around Senate Bill 240, for us, two things in terms of how it would benefit JPS. The main thing being that it prohibits discipline or retaliation for a good faith incident report. So again, in that guise of encouraging our employees who may encounter, an act of violence in the workplace, this bill would prohibit retaliation or, anything negative happening to them from their organization for reporting that. And we certainly encourage our employees, and they go through, extensive training when it comes to workplace violence today. And we hope that we offer a culture that encourages them already to speak up if there is an issue. But this would codify it in law in that, you healthcare entity are prohibited from discipline or retaliation in some way for a good faith incident report. And then I think, much more broadly, we're ahead of the curve in terms of, workplace violence prevention, in my opinion, but there's many healthcare organizations that don't have a workplace violence prevention committee. They don't have formal policies and procedures in place. And so just more broadly for the healthcare industry as a whole, to have these types of plans across the state, across varying healthcare organizations, to me, that sends a message to the healthcare industry as a whole that we care about this, and we're doing something about this from a state level, to encourage employees and encourage their employers as a healthcare entity, to take this seriously and to really support their employees. So.
I did, but I did my own research. So,
Okay.
But I'll do it for record because I just wanted to know how they were defining healthcare worker within a hospital under SB 844. And it says hospital personnel includes nurses, physicians, physician assistants, maintenance of janitorial staff, receptionists, and other individuals who are employed by or work in
Right.
a facility that is licensed as a general hospital, special hospital. So I just wanted to make sure that our other staff, including our social workers and our CNAs, all of our caregivers, are included within that definition. So,
Right, right, yeah.
As long as that was there.
I think it originally only applied to primarily ER staff and nurses in particular, but they've broadened it, to your point, to be a much greater swath of healthcare, employees, staff across the board.
I just have to. I'll try Daphne.
You had a question.
Globally, progress on behavioral health legislation. Is that a priority?
We have. There is significant funds that will be coming from the state with regards to behavioral health. There's quite a bit that still remains to be seen on how those funds are going to be allocated. For instance, I know you're aware that Tarrant County as a county entity has been advocating for the state to put in $15 million into this budget for a Tarrant County study and planning grant for a Tarrant County mental health hospital. I don't think that they are going to get funds this session directly allocated to that study. I think that there are conversations around some grants that could be used to support forensic beds, in counties. But I don't know this session that there will be funds specifically for that Tarrant County study that they're wanting today. So Lois Colkhorst is the state senator that chairs the Senate Health and Human Services Commission. This is really between her and Senator Joan Huffman, who chairs Senate Finance. A lot of work is being done between them and those two committees on how those behavioral health funds are going to be allocated. So I think they're going to leave some flexibility to Health and Human Services or HHSC at the state level on how to administer those funds. I could see probably some of those funds coming to the local mental health authority and them, funneling down to their existing partners in different ways. There's just quite a bit that's left to be seen on how they're actually going to allocate the funds.
Thank you.
So we'll be involved in those conversations, though, for sure. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Ashley.
You're welcome.
She's been quite
Most
busy.
welcome.
Just to remind the board that today is May 11th, and so that is the end of the public health emergency, so we're working through it as all hospitals are working through it. Some of the flexibilities that the public health emergency allowed us were around how we provided telehealth services. We were allowed to expand into our current space with additional care spaces, and some of the billing rules had been relaxed, so we're working through that. With that said, Governor Abbott has continued to extend the COVID-19 disaster declaration, and so we are anticipating that he will also end that soon, and so we are working through that. But today is May 11th. And with that, Madam Chair, is my report.
Thank you. Thank you. Did anyone have a question for Dr. Duncan? All right. Then we will move to item 8. Dr. Miles.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The first item up for your approval is the routine medical staff appointments and privileges. That is located in the red folder next to your iPads for you to review. I have nothing to report regarding any irregularities or red flags. It's just routine appointments this month.
Okay.
I have a question.
Okay. We can do the second. Now you can ask your question, okay?
Do you have a second?
Zim seconded.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah, Dr. Miles, on page 21, if you have the same document that I'm looking at, we're adding D and C for obstetrical indications. Can you tell us what are the valid obstetrical indications for D and C?
So you've jumped ahead of me in the agenda.
Oh,
We're back on your red folder for the appointments and privileges, but we can take your question when we move forward.
Okay.
No,
So
let's
this
finish.
is the medical staff appointments.
Yeah, let's
Sorry.
finish with the appointments then. It's been moved in second. All those in favor of approving the privilege signify by saying aye. Those opposed by nay. Motion passes unanimous. All right, next we are with your delineation of privileges forms.
Yes, ma'am, thank
Okay.
you. This is the delineation of privilege forms for your approval this month. These are for general surgery and obstetrics and gynecology. As we've talked about before, anything in yellow is an addition or a modification. The things in gray are things that appear on more than one delineation of privilege form. So they're things that are not unique to, for example, surgery. You have seen the obstetrics and gynecology one approximately 2 months ago. I think it came before you in March, and there were some questions at that time regarding the language on page 21 that's highlighted, which I believe is your question, Mr. Woodard.
Yes, ma'am.
So I want to assure the board we took your concerns very seriously, and we took this to legal counsel, in-house legal counsel, to review the language. And counsel has advised the medical staff that they feel that language is wholly consistent with current Texas statute and can be accepted as presented to you on page 21.
Madam Chair, sorry.
Yes.
I just started talking.
Go ahead.
Here's what I'd like to do if we can on this. I'd like to get that same legal counsel if we can talk about this in closed session. So what I would propose is that we approve general surgery as is, have a legal discussion in closed session over the OB-GYN privileges, and then approval after that is necessary.
All right, we will come back and approve the OB one. That's what you're after.
Yes, ma'am.
We go into closed session. We'll come back out and do
I
that.
also had a question about general surgery, though.
Well, let's ask it now.
Very quickly. I noticed that we're taking the number of procedures up quite a bit, which seems good to me. Is there a reason, rationale behind that?
Yeah, that's actually a really good question, Mr. Davis. When we are reviewing this delineation of privileges, we are not just looking internally, we are looking externally as well. So we're comparing our privilege forms to other places that have a like patient population, a like volume, and trying to ensure that we're hitting it somewhere in the middle. So the reason this particular form has an increased number is because we were low compared to peers, and we decided that that would be appropriate to move it on up. And yes, it is a slightly more stringent requirement that these surgeons will have to meet to keep their privileges, but we agree with you. We think that's a good thing for quality.
Well, and I've been on this board for 4 months, and Dr. Duncan still won't let me do a surgery, so maybe it's something to do with that. But thank you.
That's why we up the.
That's why you upped it, yeah, sure.
Are there any more questions concerning the general surgery delineation of the privileges? There being none, I'll entertain a motion for the approval of the general surgery.
So moved.
Okay. All right. It's been moved and second. All those in favor of approval of the general surgery signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those approved by nay. Motion passes unanimous. Okay. Next, we will go into our committee reports, and we will begin with finance, planning, and investment. DT.
For the planning part, I'm going to yield to our chair first. Go ahead, Trent.
Thank you, DT. Appreciate you carrying on for me. I had to miss this meeting, but appreciate your help in getting us through it. Recommendations for the board today: approve the release of the RFP for project plan review and inspection services consultant for our bond-related projects. Also, recommendation to award the RFQ for site acoustics and vibration consulting. Y'all remember that was the effort to make sure that when we start the central utility plant that the railroad won't have negative impact on it. Recommendation to award the RFQ for landscape architect consulting services to Dunaway, and recommendation for RFQ transition activation and move services to Corvallis. Finally, recommendation to refer the 2 top RFQ respondents for design services, main hospital replacement, to the Commissioners Court for interview. The top 2 respondents, Paige Heffler Walker and Beck Architecture, and those, if you'll recall, were specific requirements of the court that certain RFQs be brought to them for decision. So that concludes the planning recommendations, Madam Chair.
Right. Are there any questions for Trent? Okay.
Madam Chair,
Finance.
For our Finance Committee report, our CFO presented us with our report and indicated that a single audit for federal award will be completed this month and will be on the portal when it's finalized. She also ran the estimated financial result for our 12 months projected for 2023. That way we can have a mid-year look at the financial report. From our March financial, JPS had a strong inpatient, outpatient activity for March, resulting in operating income of about $15.5 million compared to our budget of $4.6 million. For our year-to-date, the operating income was $56.3 for the 6 month ended in March also as well. The largest variance is the receipt of the HARP supplement funding, which had not been approved by CMS when we did the budget for the year, so it was added on to it. Salaries, supplies, and drugs continue to exceed our fixed budget, but it was supported by additional volume. The year-to-date, our non-operating revenue have exceeded budget with strong market performance and the sales of several properties also as well. The projected operating margin for 12 months for a year and for FY23 is $115.5 million compared to our budget of $69.3 million, primarily due to the recognition of the HARP. In addition, retail pharmacy and strong inpatient activity coupled with some expense savings contribute to a favorable outcome also as well. And then in our consent, we also approved 13 contracts, and it's presented in the consent agenda for approval. Out of that, we have 1 exemption to bid also as well. So that's conclude our report.
Right. Any questions or for Trent or DT? Okay. All right. There being none, then we will move into our next item, and that will be the Las Vegas Trail Karen and Joy.
Yeah. So if we can have our guest up here along with Joy at the table. You want to take one of our chairs maybe here and take it back? I think we also have Cook's Children. Chris?
Yes, we have a seat.
If we can have all of the partners up here at the table.
Oh, hey, what's your- You got it? Yeah. All right. Musical chairs.
Oh, here, you know what, speaking of musical chairs here. Dr. Ned, yeah, that's.
Thank you.
I think we got, okay. Chris, you're going to have to move a little bit over here. I know you're trying to. So this is a really exciting time for me. Just a little bit of background. Shortly after stepping into this position as CEO, I had the opportunity to meet with Rick Merrill, who is the CEO at Cook's Children. And during our conversation, he turned to me and he said, hey, Karen, I was gifted some property over in the Las Vegas Trail. Are you interested in partnering on providing some health care in that community? It's a very high-need area. There's a lot of work that's going on there, and it would be a great opportunity for this public-private partnership. And I thought, wow, the board's going to think I'm really good. But I felt it was a gift. It was right before Christmas. And then probably within about 2 weeks, Councilman Crane comes in and he starts talking about his vision over in the Las Vegas Trail and just showed so much excitement. And I said, oh, yeah, by the way, I met with Rick Merrill and he has some property. He said, yes, that's part of this. So there's been a lot of work that's going on. I think it's great to have a leader such as Councilman Crane who has a vision, but not only has a vision, but creates reality around it. And so Joy is going to give a presentation here today. But before she starts, I'd like to introduce everyone who's come, which includes members of Cook's Children and Councilman Crane. And welcome here. And I know that Mr. Merrill said that their board has received this similar presentation, and we're very excited about it also. So thank you for being here. And Joy, I'm going to turn it over to you, but if we can introduce everyone who's joined us today.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. So I'll start here with Chris. So go ahead, Chris.
Chris Pedigo. I am the Senior Vice President over Strategy and Planning. I oversee our community health initiatives, and I also lead our education department.
Yeah, wonderful.
So I'm Jonathan Nedrolo. I'm a neonatologist. I had a chance to meet Dr. Duncan really by chance in the elevators over at Cook the other day. So I've been in town for about 20 years, and I'm also the Associate Chief Medical Officer, and I couldn't be more excited about this project.
Yeah, and Michael Crane, and I have the privilege of representing District 3 on the Fort Worth City Council, and I'll defer to Joy as part of the presentation and work through it through there.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I have to say, coming up in front of the microphone, and Dr. Carla Pudi, you'll have your fair share. It's not often that we get to have friends with us. So I feel like this is going to go really well today. So, but in reality, when you think about JPS and our strategic plan, which is, really looking at building healthy and thriving communities, we do that through partnerships. And so it really is such a gift and an opportunity for us to be able to not only partner with our colleagues at Cook Children's, but really, and I know Councilman Crane will speak to this, be a part of a collaboration of multiple partners so that we can holistically go into a neighborhood of great need and make a difference, not only for the patients that will have the opportunity to see and to serve, but really a legacy of a family and a neighborhood and a community. And so Councilman Crane, he is so passionate, and I have a slide in here about the statistics and the history. I will defer to him to speak a little bit to that, but I'm going to kind of kick off with how this journey began. And so this journey began, as Dr. Duncan stated, with an opportunity of a land that is at the intersection of Calmont and Cherry. So if you're familiar with the Las Vegas Trail neighborhood, it sits just south of 30, west over of like by Camp Bowie, and then east of 820. And I'm really proud of myself saying that because I'm directionally challenged on all fronts. So there is some land there, but speaking about this opportunity, Cook Children's was intentional about meeting the needs, the healthcare needs. And it just so happened, as we, JPS, as we were refreshing our 2017 Citizens Blue Ribbon Committee report, as we did a refresh of that data with Broadus Levis, the two zip codes that really rose to the top of a top 4 need for health needs was the 76116 zip code, which is where Las Vegas Trail sits, as well as 76108, which is just northwest of that, which is the White Settlement area. And so that catchment area is what we see as an opportunity as we venture forward in moving with a neighborhood clinic that Cook Children's will be building. So you can see here, I've put a few photos of some renderings of what this neighborhood clinic will look like. It is 38,000 square feet. And we are anticipating an opening around early 2025. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Councilman Crane just to give you a brief history of the Las Vegas Trail neighborhood and some of the exciting collaborative work effort that's already in play.
Thanks. Thank you, Joy. I won't belabor this. I know after all the meetings I have to sit through, I applaud your service here, but there's some things. This is a really great day, and I think. Listen, I'm going to get emotional because I always do, but the thing is the reason I think people like me and my esteemed predecessor Zim Zimmerman and my smart colleague that just got off get into public service because you can make a difference in the lives of others. A lot of people that will never know all the work that went behind it to get it done. And as Dr. Duncan, thank you, as you already alluded to, when I came into office as a District 3 office, I'd already been doing a lot of work in the Las Vegas Trail area. And it took synergies that happened, you coming into the position, Cook Children's was already looking at going into the area. I pulled the meeting together right after I was elected with our assistant city manager and basically every healthcare facility or someone doing the healthcare, and we had a great lunch, and I said, who wants to play in this realm? And Cook Children's stepped forward. JPS was there too, and said, we're already looking at going this, but they're going to go north. And it just happened that, again, I think things happen the way they're supposed to, that that land was donated in the Las Vegas Trail area, and we'd already put a lot of thought into the pillars of changing the direction of that community. And as you alluded to, the history there, I grew up going to Las Vegas Trail in the 80s. My aunt lived there. It was a great place to be. It was built in support of a lot of the work the base was doing. And we knew anecdotally there were problems there, but we didn't know exactly, and I needed something to package up. So one of the first things we did too, and the help of my colleague Leonard Firestone, is commission a report that a national firm that looked at they do revitalization in different areas, and what they found in a lot of different ways. We knew crime was a problem there. 1% of the population lives in the geographic area. It's 4% of the crime in Fort Worth. It's a drain on our resources. We also knew from the work that was being done by y'all in the hospitals what that drain was on your resources here, where people were using your facilities as primary care, but it was an emergency primary care, not the primary care that they needed. And so all of that kind of came together in a way that just made sense for us to find a way to put something there. And I won't belabor the statistics. It's up there a little bit. The 76116, 76108, JPS, you already have 9 to 12,000 visits a year that are coming from that area. Cook Children's has about 4,000. They anticipate 10 to 12,000 visits once there's some health care in place. It's going to alleviate at your Northside neighborhood clinic 6,200 visits a year that are going there. Cook Children's has 7,500 people that are on their children's health plan out of the area, and you'll speak more to the neighborhood concept. But I think overall the need was there, and if you haven't focused on the area area of Fort Worth. My district goes all the way from TCU to Walsh. And so when you look at between that area, the further and westernmost part of any kind of healthcare outside the Cook Children's Clinic that's been put out near Walsh is Viola Pitts and Miss Dubose area in Como. So there was a need out there in some way, shape, or form. And so I'm glad y'all are stepping forward for that need. And I have some people to thank, but I want you to go on with the presentation so we can finish on.
Yeah, absolutely. So some other synergies that we knew this was the right thing and this collaboration was the right thing is the transformation plan. And so we, our JPS, Cook Children's, as well as other entities have been a part of this neighborhood transformation plan. And so when we look at investment that's already happening in this neighborhood, we knew that this was a great opportunity for us to collaborate alongside. The county has committed dollars to the improvement as well as the city of Fort Worth, and there continues to be conversations about private funding opportunities when you bring all of these players to the table to help to elevate this neighborhood. And I put Councilman Crane's wonderful letter in here, actually. That was a great statement.
And we'll share that with everybody, right? The plan, if they haven't seen it already?
Absolutely.
Perfect. Thank you.
And I will tell you, it was a full meeting. I mean, like stacked in all of the folks that Councilman Crane helps to facilitate this organizational effort to bring all of this together. So here's a map of the clinic service area kind of projected of showing the 76116 and 76108 area. And that northwest corner is really where the star is. That's that Las Vegas Trail area that we are targeting. So as we met and looked at needs, we looked at our community health needs assessment. We looked at our internal data. We talked obviously with Chris from a system planning perspective for what they see for pediatrics. We, in conversation, talked with our physicians. Dr. Alawi's behind me, Zelia Ball from our EVP of behavioral health, but really looking at what is the services that would complement so that as JPS and Cook Children's would collaborate in a space, how we would complement the services to meet the full continuum of care of a family that would come there. And so with that, we have Cook's, which is the strength and pediatrics, and then JPS coming alongside and looking to provide adult family medicine, where we could help to provide that adolescent up into young adulthood and beyond. We recognized in this neighborhood that it has a high rate of female and then single households. And so in looking at some of our internal data, we noticed women traveling to get to Maine or Northwest Women's Maine for women's care. And so it makes sense for us to engage with Dr. Sangha and our team from Women's Health to have a women's health presence here. And then, of course, within the community needs assessment, we continue to identify opportunities for behavioral health and those support services for our patients. And so there will be a behavioral health presence from JPS within this location. In addition to that, we understand the importance and the value, and we'll be collaborating with Cook Children's around community health worker, social work support, as well as their health plan, obviously, that Chris mentioned will be involved and present. And then we also will provide eligibility and enrollment as we look at opportunity for those that don't have health insurance. Are they eligible for JPS Connection? How could we help to support that enrollment and also other programs that might exist so that we can get them connected in that way. On this slide, you can see a couple of others, and these are really just some bullets specific to some of the health-related programming. But we have West Aid, Tarrant Area Food Bank, their Red Bus, which we utilize at our clinic locations today. We will have, there's a nutrition presence that'll be on campus. There's a demonstration kitchen that will be available for healthy cooking classes. There's some spaces for peer support and any type of collective group classes that might need to happen. Fort Worth PD is present and will have a storefront location within the building as well to be a helpful present. And then our colleagues and our friends over at LVT Rise, we talk with them, we work with them, their community center and some of the different training programs and after-school programs, child care associates. There really is a great opportunity within this large space to work collaboratively together to meet those needs for this community. So we're really excited. This is the high level of where we're at, but please know behind the scenes, we are meeting weekly on those operational logistics and conversations for the details behind all of this. And so for next steps, we continue to finalize terms. The space that we're looking at would be a lease space within the Cook Children's Building. And then, of course, the ongoing operational conversations that are occurring. Next, we anticipate an update at Commissioner's Court, which we will invite our same friends here today, May 16th. And then, of course, announcing this to our community. And I think the community is very much aware there's a lot of work happening. There's been a lot of involvement, just street code policy, all kinds of things that are occurring already in this neighborhood that has made some media attention. And so this will be another exciting announcement. I think that will be a next step for us. And so with that, I welcome any questions.
Any further comments?
I'll just say
Michael?
this, Dr. Duncan, thank you for spearheading this effort from here, and Joy, thank you for that part too. I know Dr. Alawi and Zelia Baugh helped here with JPS as well, and our partners at Cook Children's, Rick Merrill, who saw the vision too, and Chris Pedigo that's here as well, and Dr. Nedrilo, Karen Love, Natalie Wilkins, Spencer Seals is over there, Becky Hale, Veronica Tolley, Marilyn Napier. I give you all those names but to show you this was really been a team effort and a collaboration. And from what I understand too, the first of its kind public-private partnership of a facility like this. And so I'm very proud of it. And I know this will be a testament to Fort Worth, Texas, Tarrant County's ongoing commitment to help our most vulnerable, those people that are on the edge, those people that need hope, and that, again, they may not even know all the work, and they won't know all the work that went into it. But this will be a place for them, I know, where they can get that and get back on their feet and back into being alive. So I appreciate that.
Yeah. Thank you. And Rick Merrill had hoped to have been here today. He had another obligation. The invite was a little bit late. Those calendars fill up, but that, again, speaks to the strong partnership. So thank
Trent, you had a question?
Yeah, more an observation. Karen, first of all, thank you.
Thank you.
This has been a long time in the making, and I appreciate the work that you and staff have put in to make this a reality. I think one of the things that would help sort of conceptualize this for the board is relative to, and DT and I both sat on the Blue Ribbon Committee, so we know the origins and we know the outcomes. One of the elements of Blue Ribbon Committee that was to some extent a little vague moving forward was what the best locations were going to be for community clinics and were there opportunities for community collaboration. Instead of JPS having to go out there and necessarily bond 4 separate clinics, were there opportunities to be able to combine forces to be able to reduce that cost and still create an incredible, meet an amazing need in the area. So thank you all. Fantastic effort for bringing this forward. I'm really, really thrilled about the progress of this and appreciate it very much what you guys have done.
Well, thank you, and thank you for your support, Trent.
Yes, Ms. Farstow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, everyone, for allowing me this opportunity to join the board. I'm excited about it. But I was going to be quiet on the first meeting. Observe.
I told you that this morning.
But I do think it's worth noting because I have seen the other side of this from City Council and Michael's vision, as it was described, that started right away as you got into office. And he's right. It is something that we should all be proud of, and people are proud of you, Michael, for having that vision and getting the different parties together to produce something that is essential. And more than that, I think the takeaway, I believe, from the city and perhaps all the stakeholders is, where else can we do this and do it well, as we're such a fast-growing city? There's going to be a need. So it's just a compliment to everyone involved and a recognition, Michael, of your vision for this and leadership. So we certainly appreciate it. The community does in a big way.
Thank you. Team effort, for sure.
Well,
thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Crane and Joy and the rest of Cooks, for all of your work. I am very glad to see this part of it coming together. So thank you. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank y'all. Thank y'all.
All right.
Madam Chair, I have a question on, will we see this lease? Will that come back to us, or are we just learning today? Okay.
That will come back to you as we work out the details when they get worked out.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Thank y'all. Appreciate it.
All right, thank you. All right. Next, we will have, Sharon, will you come up and introduce the Hilltop Security Management project? You want some water? You want some water?
Hand that over to you. Let me make sure it's on. Yeah. So I'd like to take a minute to introduce Greg Warner. He's with Hilltop Securities, and Hilltop has managed our long-term and short-term investments for at least 8 years, going on 9 now. And I'll let Greg tell you a little bit about his background, but what I wanted to do today, I always have Greg come at the end of the year in November or December, but we've had a few changes, not only in the investment performance in the market, but we've also got a few new board members. So today he's going to touch on a little bit on the market, but also do some board education around what types of investments we're allowed to get into. They also have our new bond funds. So the $450 million that we issued a few months ago is also managed in this portfolio. So I'm going to turn it over to Greg, and thank you very much.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So, yes, Greg Warner, I'm at Hilltop Securities Asset Management. We're a division of Hilltop Securities. In my group, our entire focus is on managing investments for public entities, cities, counties, school districts, hospital authorities, so on. We are focused exclusively in what we call fixed income. We don't do stocks and equities. We don't do pension funds. We're entirely in short and intermediate term fixed income for the types of investments that the hospital holds. And I believe we've got a slide deck having a variety of different security types, maturing at different maturing at different points in time. And we're trying to generally reduce the risk in the portfolio overall. We'll talk a lot about the Fed and also the Federal Open Market Committee, the FOMC. The Fed, as you know, is the nation's central bank. They're tasked with regulating banks. They also are tasked with implementing monetary policy. And the Fed tries to exert influence. I hesitate to use the word control, but they'd like to think they have control over things like inflation and economic growth. They're able to influence that through manipulating what is known as the Fed funds rate, which is a key benchmark lending rate. Another common term here is local government investment pool. We refer to these as pools. Essentially, these are cooperatives of local governments that have come together and put their money together in a cooperative for the purpose of investing them. And what we're looking at are essentially money market mutual funds. The pools operate exactly like a money market mutual fund. So it's a very short-term, very liquid, very safe investment. And then the other item is weighted average maturity. This is simply the average maturity of the portfolio weighted by the dollar amount or the value of each investment. We'll also refer to weighted average yield quite a bit, which is the same thing. Importantly, like all public entities in the state, the hospital's investments are governed by Chapter 2256 of the Texas Government Code. This is known as the Public Funds Investment Act, or the PFIA. Basically, it provides the guidelines for investments of public dollars in the state, dictates the objective, and the primary objective for all public entities is safety of principal. So we'll talk about how much money you earn, but our primary focus is ensuring that your principal remains safe and that you don't lose money. The PFIA severely restricts the type of investments that you're allowed to invest in. Primarily, these include obligations of the U.S. government and its agencies and instrumentalities, municipal obligations from state and local governments, certificates of deposit at local banks. These have to be secured by either pledged collateral or FHLB letters of credit. You may have read in the news about some of the stuff going on with banks. The hospital does not have unsecured or uninsured deposits at any banks, so your deposits are secured with letters of credit. Prime commercial paper is another instrument that we'll utilize, followed up with money market funds and more commonly local government investment pools. The hospital also has an investment policy, which essentially mirrors the guidelines of the PFIA. This is the document that sort of dictates what we're able to do as investment managers. Additional restrictions over and above the PFIA primarily focus around the term to maturity. The PFIA has no maturity limitations. Your policy has two primary limitations. Final maturity of any individual investment cannot exceed 5 years, and the weighted average maturity of the portfolio cannot exceed 2 years. The operating and emergency operating funds actually have some slightly shorter horizons because of the nature and the timing of how those funds are spent. I'm going to speed through a quick economic update, and then I want to get into the portfolio. So if you'll excuse me while I race through this, feel free to interrupt me and stop me along the way if you have any questions. The big things going on in the market, of course, over the course of the last 14 months, the Federal Reserve, in its efforts to contain inflation, has raised their overnight Fed funds target by 5%, 500 basis points. That's the fastest pace of rate hikes we've seen in modern history. We are seeing some signs that the economy is beginning to slow. We're seeing inflation trending lower. It's still too high, but it has been trending lower. And the job market, which has been extraordinarily strong, is just now beginning to show some signs of weakening. Many economists are forecasting recession on the horizon. The recent banking turmoil is certainly contributing to that. I'm going to fly through several charts. This is the consumer price index. On the left is the month-over-month percent change. On the right is the year-over-year percent change. The key here is you can see the bars on the left side of that are very tall. The bars on the right start to get a little bit shorter. So the big inflation ramp up that we saw through 2021 and 2022 is beginning to moderate. The headline consumer price index peaked at just over 9%. In April, it fell to just under 5%. One key I'll point you to is on the right-hand chart. That red line is what is known as the Core Personal Consumption Expenditures Index. That's the Fed's primary inflation measure, and that is still running at about a 5.5% year-over-year rate. The Federal Reserve has a 2% target for that. So we are well above target even after raising funds 500 basis points. This is back on the Consumer Price Index. This sort of breaks it down into its components. I like this chart because it really shows what's happened over the last couple of years. Through 2020, you can see the impact of COVID, where prices fell pretty sharply. Through 2021, you can see we reopened the economy and prices began to rebound. Russia's invasion of Ukraine contributed to energy inflation, which you see in the gray bars at the top with the peak of that chart. And then the light blue bars at the bottom is services. Services is the largest component of inflation, and you can see even now that is still running 4% on an annual basis. Services, the primary component of services is housing or shelter cost. This is a chart that shows the shelter component of the consumer price index. It has peaked out at about 8% on a year-over-year basis. So again, the Fed is targeting 2% inflation. If shelter costs are averaging 8% annual inflation, it's going to be tough to get to a 2% target. Shelter, of course, reflects housing prices. How do you control housing prices? Well, higher mortgage rates will certainly help. We've gone from a 3.5% mortgage rate to a 6.5% mortgage rate the last couple of years. Predictably, that's having an impact on home sales. The chart on the left is existing home sales. You can see they've fallen off sharply. That's both a cost and a supply issue. Folks that have 3 or 3.5% mortgages aren't real anxious to sell their existing home and take a new mortgage at 6.5%. So we're seeing lower supply in existing sales. That's actually helping a little bit in new home sales, but you can see the sales pace of both is down sharply. That, of course, begins to impact prices. This is the year-over-year percent change in a 20-city home price index. You can see through the pandemic and the year after, home prices were advancing at roughly 20% year over year. We've now taken that back down to where home prices are essentially flat versus where they were last year. They certainly haven't collapsed, but we're not seeing the big increases any longer. This should begin to have an impact on inflation, and we should start seeing inflation readings taper off later this year. Job growth is another area where we're starting to see some signs of slowing. The chart on the left is the change in non-farm payrolls, the number of new jobs created each month. During 2022, we were averaging almost 400,000 jobs per month. Over the last 3 months, that's down to 222,000. So we're seeing slowing in job growth. However, the unemployment rate at 3.4% is at the lowest level since 1969. So very low unemployment has contributed to wage inflation. We can see that in the employment cost indices. The chart on the left is average hourly earnings. So this is take-home pay for employees. And you can see a couple of years ago when inflation was stable, that was running at about a 3% annual pace. Today it's running somewhere between 4 and 5%. The employment cost index, what employers have to pay for wages and salaries and benefits, is still running just below 5% on a year-over-year basis. Again, these are big contributors to the inflation. We are starting to see some signs of slowing in the job market. Claims for unemployment benefits are trending higher. That's the chart on the left. And available jobs, job openings, the chart on the right, is beginning to trend lower as well. I'm going to skip over these next couple of charts. Essentially, they just show a gradual slowing in the economy. But again, we're nowhere near things collapsing very quickly. I mentioned the Fed funds target. So the chart on the left shows the Fed funds rate. This is the Fed tightening monetary policy very abruptly and very quickly and very aggressively, hoping to get inflation under control. They've taken the headline inflation rate from 9% down to just under 5%. But again, with a 2% target, it does not appear that their work is quite done yet. Markets do expect that it's going to change. This is the Fed funds futures. This is where markets expect that Fed funds rate will be at the end of this year. The big point here is, as we led it into March, markets were still expecting additional rate hikes from the Fed. You can see that peak at 5.59%. And then we had the SVB bank collapse in early March. And you can see that completely changed the outlook for both the economy and the Fed funds rate. And that's why we've seen that big decline. The markets are now expecting rate cuts later this year. You've also probably heard a little bit about bank deposits and money running out of banks. The blue line is total U.S. bank deposits. You can see it had been trending lower right up until March, and then it essentially collapsed. The red line is money market mutual fund deposit or investments, and you can see that that's doing exactly the opposite. So folks are taking their money out of banks and moving it into higher interest earnings in money market mutual funds. This is a pretty big deal. We've seen about $500 billion flow out of banks in the last 2 months. Banks have to have funds to make loans, and so if they don't have funds to make loans, that implies that there'll be credit tightening. That implies the economy will slow, and that's exactly what investors are forecasting. Economists here, I've highlighted a couple of points here in the second and third quarter, expect economic growth to be negative. So again, we're looking at a possible recession in the second half of this year. And down at the bottom, you can see the trend or the expectations for interest rates is generally lower. Again, I'm going to skip ahead a couple of charts. This is a 2-year Treasury yield. You can see that it was on definitely on an upward trend for the last couple of years, right up until March. And then it fell abruptly, and we've sort of flatlined since that time. Okay, that's it on the economy. The overall, result is that we're beginning to see signs of economic slowing, but we still have inflation to contend with. I'd like to take the next couple of minutes and talk about the investment portfolio, which is what you're really here to hear about. This compares the portfolio today versus where we were at September 30th. Portfolio has grown considerably in that time. Two things happen. Number one, around the December to January timeframe, you are the beneficiaries of a whole lot of property tax revenues. Approximately $450 million of inflows from property taxes in that time period. You also, of course, had the new bond issue, which you can see there at the very top line, the 2023 Bond Construction Fund. We had $450 million of bond proceeds come into the portfolio at the very end of March. One thing I will point out is these reports are as of March 31st. So while that money did come in, it had not been invested at that point. It was in one of the local government investment pools. It was earning interest, but we hadn't purchased securities yet. Since the time of these reports, we've now made about $400 million worth of purchases of those securities, and we've positioned those maturities from August of 2023 through December of 2025, and essentially they've been positioned so that they align with the projected spending of those funds. A couple of other things that you'll see, if you look at the changes to the market value in that middle column there, a couple of big things to highlight. The future fund is up substantially. In December, the hospital rearranged some of its monies, took a lot of funds out of the operating fund, moved it into the future fund, took funds out of the emergency operating fund, moved those into the future fund. So the operating fund, you can see the net increase there is only about $84 million. But remember, it had over 400 and something million of property taxes come in, but much of that ended up in the future fund with the transfers over there. The next page has a lot of detail on it. A couple of big points here. The portfolio, again, has grown tremendously. It's up a little over $900 million over the last 6 months. So we're now at just over $2.1 billion in portfolio size. Congratulations, that makes the hospital our largest investment management client. Thank you very much. We have a number of clients in the $1 billion to $1.5 billion range. You all are the first that have topped $2 billion for us. One of the things that's really important, the portfolio characteristics, I highlighted there the yield on the portfolio. At the end of September last year, it was 1.7%. As a result of the big increase in interest rates, the portfolio yield is now just below 4% at 3.98. And by the time we get through April and into May, it'll be well north of 4%. That, of course, has a big impact on the investment earnings and the investment income. Through the first 6 months of the year, the portfolio has earned $19.6 million of investment income. Now, if you compare that to fiscal 2022, for the entire year, the portfolio earned $7.7 million. In 2021, it was $3.6 million. So higher interest rates and a larger portfolio is certainly improving the investment income and the performance in the portfolio. I do expect that this will easily exceed $50 million year to date. By the time we get through the end of your fiscal year. Interest rates continue to trend higher, and of course, with $400 million worth of bond proceeds, the portfolio is much, much larger. All told, in the first 6 months of this year, we've invested over $1.3 billion in new purchases for the hospital. On a net basis, net of the maturities, it's been about $700 million increase in the portfolio investment holdings. This next page shows the top 10 holdings and the maturity distribution. Again, this is influenced by the bond proceeds coming in so late in March. That overnight bucket, which is approximately 30% today, about 20% of that is made up of the bond proceeds. So we've been working to reduce that overnight bucket and spread those maturities out across the timeline there. And as you look over at the top 10 holdings, Techstar, that's one of the local government investment pools. Again, approximately 20% there is bond proceeds that came in late in the month. So in the next month, you'll see that we will reduce the holdings in the pools in Techstar, and we will increase holdings primarily in some of the government agencies. That includes the Federal Home Loan Banks, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and U.S. Treasuries. So all of those things will increase. But you can see we have a pretty well-diversified portfolio. We're spread out in terms of our maturities. We're spread out in terms of our investment holdings. And again, that is all intentional and designed to reduce your risk. This page looks at the asset allocation. This shows how the portfolio is invested in different types of instruments. On the left, in September, we had a little over 30% in agencies and almost 40% in U.S. Treasuries. So about 70% of the investments were U.S. government and government agency securities. and a little over 10% was in essentially cash and pool holdings. On the right, as of 3/31, we're down to about 40% in agencies and less than 20% in treasuries. Again, that's partially a function of all the bond money coming in so late. We had almost 30% in LGIPs, and we have reduced that again. We're going to trim that down to about 15 to 20%, and we'll take the government and agencies back up to around 70%. In terms of credit, very high ratings in terms of credit quality. That, of course, is dictated by the Public Funds Investment Act and your investment policy. About 7% of the portfolio is held in what we call secured deposits. So these are bank deposits that are secured. 15% is in the highest short-term rating category, which is A1 and A1+. And then about almost 80%, 78% of the portfolio falls into that AAA category with U.S. government and agency securities. And then finally, the benchmark comparison. This looks at your portfolio yield versus some benchmarks. Primarily, these are Treasury, U.S. Treasury benchmarks. And we would expect the portfolio to fall somewhere in between the 6-month and the 1-year CMT. And we are right there. The portfolio is lagging a little bit behind some of the shorter benchmarks because it's not resetting to higher yields quite as quickly. But we do expect, of course, with adding $450 million of bond proceeds and new investments, that yield will pick up. We're also going to see some of the benchmarks begin to level off. The rapid acceleration that we saw through the last year will begin to ease, and so the portfolio should, continue to remain right in line with those benchmarks. And I've probably taken up more time than I should have. Done, and happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Question on the, I guess the future fund that we move over. Does the interest there goes back to operating or it stay on that side?
That's an accounting question that I don't have an exact answer for. In our world, those things stay in the fund where they are.
That's what I was assuming, but
the finance and accounting department, Sharon, may have a better answer for you there.
Yeah, those continue to build. So if it's in the future fund, we'll have earnings that will increase the future fund until we use them for construction.
in terms of, let's say we have $1 today. How much do you think that dollar will be worth by 2027?
Well, that's kind of a trick question. So $1 today, so if we maintain roughly a 4% earnings rate, which is approximately where we are today, so you would add 4 cents every year. So after 4 years, you would compound roughly 18 cents of earnings.
About 20.
Question on
the same rate that we kind of lost from 2020 to now, right?
Yeah.
Question on paralleling future fund and bond fund investment strategies. Are we in a circumstance where we're trying to keep a larger portion of liquidity in the future fund than we are in the bond fund? Are we running those on a parallel strategy?
We've invested the bond funds so that their maturities match up with the expected spending on that project. We've positioned it so that the bond funds get spent first. So that covers the projected expenses through about December of 2025. Beyond December of 2025, we would begin to dip into the future fund. The future fund, yes, the future fund can go out further if those funds aren't needed. Now, over the course of the last couple of years, we've kept those investments very short because interest rate environment was not conducive. So we have been able to begin extending those maturities a little bit. We haven't gotten very aggressive with extending them so far. But now that we have interest rates, plateauing and leveling off, I expect that we will extend those a little bit further.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Greg, thank you for your presentation. I have a couple of questions. One following up on Trent's question about the future fund. The future fund's holding all of our ad valorem tax right now, which we're going to be spending in the next 12 months. So is it long-term? Is the future fund future, or is it tomorrow?
No, sir. The ad valorem taxes are primarily held in the operating fund. The operating fund had built up a large base, and so funds were transferred in December, but the ad valorem taxes flow into the operating fund and are spent out of the operating fund. And that operating fund has a very short average maturity.
So what is the purpose of the future fund? What are those funds targeted for?
So the future fund is identifying operating funds that are above what the target would be of around 220 days cash on hand. And those will be used for the $1.5 billion of construction. So we have approval from the voters for $800 million of bonds. We've issued 450 of that. The second tranche in a couple of years would be $350 million. And then the other 700 will eventually come from operating funds. 600 million of which we've already set aside in the future fund.
So there's also a bond construction fund, which that is from the recent bond issue?
That's from the 450 million issue.
So
Yes, sir.
is that for shorter term needs than the future fund? Is that the differentiation between the two funds?
The bond funds will be used first, and then we'll start to, so the first phase of construction is about $650 million without the towers. So the first 450 will be pulled from the bond funds. We'll have to pull 200 million from the future fund, and then we'll start construction on the towers after we get pretty much through phase one.
And is the purpose for maintaining two funds different maturities?
Well, the bond funds are but the bond funds are, we have a cash flow for the first phase of construction, the 650 million. So the bond fund has been pretty much laid out to mature given the cash flow. And those will be used first, and then the future fund will be accessed. And he said, you know, we haven't really had an advantageous market to get too far out until recently. So I think over the next quarter or two, you'll see the future fund average maturity go up.
Okay, that was leading to my next question. So if you look at slide 64, which is your maturity slide, you have nothing in 3 years out. Is that the plan, is to move more into the 3, 4, maybe even we can go up to 5 years, which is the maximum allowed?
Yes, sir. I would expect that, in particular from the future fund and also the indenture agreements, we can move some of those funds out.
Okay.
But I would expect that the future fund in particular, we would have some longer term investments. And we do, as of April, we have some a little bit further out in that bucket, partially from the bond proceeds. And backing up just a second to your prior question, we also have to account for the bond funds separately in order to meet Internal Revenue Service reporting obligations on those funds. So the earnings on the bond fund, we have to be able to account for those separately so that they can be reported to the IRS.
Okay, thank you. Your forecast is for inflation to continue dropping off, so locking in your longer yields, maturities now is probably advantageous.
Yeah, we've been in a really difficult situation because and I'm going to go back to a slide because I think it'll help illustrate what I'm going to tell you here, and I went too far. So as we were moving, this is really a really important chart for us. So this gives us an indication of the expectations for future interest rates. So you can see from January all the way through the beginning of March, that line kept moving higher and kept moving higher. So the expectation at that time was that interest rates would keep climbing. And in fact, the end of 23 had the expectation was the Fed funds target would wind up at 560 by the end of the year. In an environment like that, we're not that anxious to extend our maturities real quickly. We're waiting for us to get closer to the peak. What happened, of course, is with the SVB bank collapse, things changed, and they changed very, very suddenly. So if I could wind the clock back, I would go back to January and February and March, and I would invest as much as I possibly could out as far as I possibly could. But at that time, I did not have the foreknowledge to understand that SVB Bank was about to collapse and the expectation was going to change. So what we've seen is a big shift in the expectations. We've taken over 100 basis points off of the interest rate expectation. And so that's sort of changed the outlook for us a little bit. It's also resulted in what we call an inverted yield curve. And I can illustrate that here. This green line is the current yield curve. And so as you extend your maturities, the further out in time you go, the lower your investment yield becomes. So this makes a really difficult argument for me to take something where you're earning 5% in a 3-month investment and put it out 2 years or 3 years where you're going to earn less than 4%. So you're immediately going to be giving up 100 basis points of income. Now, why would I do that? I would do that because I thought that interest rates were going to fall off sharply in the future, or that inflation was going to decline sharply in the future. So up to now, we haven't been convinced that inflation was going to fall anywhere near the Fed's target. We're departing ways a little bit with the market expectation because we think inflation is going to be a little bit more persistent. And so, the market is currently pricing in 100 basis points of rate cuts later this year. We don't think we're going to get them. So I'm trying to be a little bit more patient with our investments. But having said that, we are beginning and have begun to extend some of these maturities a little bit because, to your point, we do want to have some of the portfolio locked in at what presumably would be higher yields.
Last question, Greg. You mentioned that our policy has 2 additions to the Public Funds Investment Act. One was a maturity of less than 5 years. Something was something less than 2 years. What was that second requirement?
There's the primary difference in the policy. The Public Funds Investment Act provides no guidelines around maturities. So in terms of the Public Funds Investment Act, you can invest as far out as you desire. Your investment policy on all investments is a 5-year absolute max. The weighted average maturity is limited to 2 years.
Weighted average, okay, thank you.
The operating fund is limited to 2 years final.
Is that weighted average maturity in our investment policy statement going to be a problem for you?
No.
Given all the new money we've got coming in and the long construction timeframes?
No, it won't be, because so much of the portfolio is made up of operating funds that need to stay short. And even if we'd have to invest a very large portion of the portfolio all the way out in the 5-year part for us to approach that 2-year weighted average maturity limit. I don't expect that we would.
If you see that becoming a problem, would you let Sharon know? So
absolutely.
If the policy is restraining us?
Absolutely. The policy is not a restraint for us at this time. If there was a restraint, it's because of the cash flow and the spending needs of the hospital, but that's unavoidable.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Real quickly, I'm just wondering, in our year, when do you begin to anticipate the rate of return that, annual rate of return? When is that in the budget process, I guess?
So we'll lock in the rates in the budget mid-July, and we do work with the investment counselors to try to give us their best expectation of, the quarter 25 basis point increases.
Yeah, okay.
We never get it right,
Right.
but we try to get it as close as we can.
No crystal ball.
It's really difficult because the portfolio is necessarily a pretty short average maturity. And so when interest rates are as volatile as they can be sometimes, it's difficult to make those projections.
And
no one foresaw the pandemic, which took interest rates from 3.5% to 0 literally overnight. Now the hospital benefited from its portfolio at the time, which held its rate high for a while, but rates were at 0 for so long, eventually the portfolio fell to 0. And this past year, rates have gone up so sharply. The portfolio has lagged a little bit behind on the way up, but it's also reaping the benefit of, today earning 4% when a year and a half ago it was earning 0.4%.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your report.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Right. Okay. The next on our agenda is our consent agenda. Are there any items that anyone desires to remove from the consent agenda? Okay. So then I will entertain a motion for the approval of the consent agenda. DT, Amanda seconded. Okay. All those in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed by nay. Okay, motion passes unanimously. Then I think I'm down to closed session, I think, yes, okay. So at this time, I will close the open session at 2:38, and then we'll go into closed session within, by 10 minutes to 3. Okay? That gives everybody a potty break. Okay. I need to let them know in there. item that we need to complete, and that was the approval of the delineation of the privilege form for obstetrics and gynecology. So can I get a motion to approve that? Okay. Zim, second?
Yep. Madam Chair, just to put a little context to that, it's our understanding that obviously there's no elective DNC procedures that are performed in the district, and also that the delineation of privileges is written for obstetrical indications to make that clear to those in the healthcare. So I appreciate everybody helping us through that.
Okay, all right. So my second was from, Amanda, okay, all right. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor of approval of the obstetrics and gynecology privilege form signify by saying aye. Aye. And those opposed by nay. Motion passes unanimous. There is no further business, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, got two of those. All right, we are adjourned.
Oh, room, Paula.